So we're going to move on to the second session, which is going to look at the key features and benefits of the CARIFORUM EU and UK Economic Partnership Agreements. And our presenter for this session is Ms. Shandilayne Davis, who is a career customs official with 24 years professional experience in customs operations, market access and trade facilitation, trade policy development, and international trade. Ms. Davis is the Senior Director, International and Industrial Liaison in the Operations Divisions of the Jamaica Customs Agency. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome Ms. Davis to the podium.
Once again, good morning, everyone. It is my esteemed pleasure to be with you this morning. And Kanika already gave the disclaimer that the aim here is not to make you experts, but it's to sensitize. And I'm going to add that, who are you going to call? The Jamaica Customs Agency. And you can call us as well, instead of Googling your HS code. And we will also assist you to classify the goods. But as we go through this brief presentation, I hope that you will gain a better understanding of our operations with respect to trade agreements, specifically the CARIFORUM EU and UK Economic Partnership Agreements, and the entire process of certification and enforcing rules of origin and assisting in our stakeholders gaining market access. Let me see if I can navigate this. Okay, I didn't do it correctly. Okay. Okay, there we are. Forgive me. So generally what we'll be going through this morning, we'll have an overview of the agreements, the benefits, how to access these benefits, and of course the question of rules of origin and why rules of origin will come up again. And we will examine the general and product-specific rules of origin under the EPA specifically, as well as a look at our certification process and the role of the exporter and customs in this entire process. So, the CARIFORUM, European Union and United Kingdom Economic Partnership Agreements. Now, Jamaica, or CARIFORUM, which is essentially CARICOM and the Dominican Republic, is a party of two economic partnership agreements. We are a party to the CARIFORUM EU-EPA, which was signed in 2008, and subsequent to Brexit, we became partners, a party to the CARIFORUM UK-EPA, which came into effect January 1, 2021. We're all acquainted with Brexit. So prior to Brexit, the UK was a part of the EU-EPA, but subsequent to those changes in customs relations and trade relations, CARIFORUM ministers thought it best to have a transitional agreement, that would ensure ease for our stakeholders and continuance of trade. So, both EPAs are very similar. The language is the same, with the exception of the removal of the word European Union, the words European Union, and replacement of the United Kingdom. So our liberalization schedule, which outlines the rates to be applied, would have remained the same, as well as, and that's on the import side, but also the requirements for export, rules of origin requirements would have remained the same. So the CARIFORUM EU and UK EPAs are bilateral free trade agreements between the countries of CARIFORUM and the countries of the European Union and the United Kingdom, respectively. Just to point out to you that this agreement covers trade in goods, trade in services, and development cooperation. Both EPAs allow for the progressive removal of barriers to trade and enhance cooperation between the parties. As I said, there is development cooperation, so at that level, the European Union specifically, more so than the United Kingdom, contributes through the European Development Fund to the development of the region economically. So where our projects we may have projects, development projects, we can gain funding under those funds. And as I said before, it is largely mirrored, the UK EPA largely mirrors the EU-EPA and was negotiated to facilitate ease of transition and continuity of trade between CARIFORUM and the UK. And my colleague here who spoke to Africa, no, we don't have an agreement, but CARIFORUM is the Caribbean Forum of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific states. So as CARIFORUM states, we are still a part of that, and as I progress, I will share a little bit about the ability to accumulate under this agreement. Kanika would have referenced same under the other agreements. So the parties, for the European Union, you would have seen all the members of the European Union, and note it's specific to the European Union, not to Europe. All right? So if you look closely, Switzerland is not a member of the European Union, but we do have a GSP with Switzerland. I will say that currently we predominantly export aluminium oxide to Switzerland. That's what we export, but there's a market there. And I was in discussion with our new ambassador designate to Switzerland to say that I believe that there are niche markets that can be accessed in Switzerland. So my skincare manufacturer, you may need to look at the markets there. It's an international community, and they're into niche products. And you know, our Jamaican castor oil, how you can market it for the African community there and so forth. So you need to do as Kanika encourage us to just look a little deeper, because currently that's our predominant export to Switzerland. The parties to the United Kingdom, England, Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. And you know, we would predominantly export our primary products, agro-processed foods, rums. Those are our primary products that we export in generally. And of course, the members of CARIFORUM are listed here. And moving right along, the benefits. Reduce barriers to trade and enhance market access. Predictable market access for EU, UK, and CARIFORUM. So the way it is designated, and it's broken down below, for us in CARIFORUM in Jamaica, we are guaranteed duty-free and quota-free market access into the EU and UK for all CARIFORUM originating products. So once it meets the origin criteria, thank you very much. Once it reaches meets the originating criteria, you are guaranteed zero import duties on when the product gets to the market. Now we're talking about import duties. There may be other barriers to trade, such as standards and regulations, and as I progress, I will mention those. And this is accepting arms and ammunition, all right? So it's not like some countries where you may encounter a reduced rate of duty. It's a zero rate of duty. Now, one of the benefits of the EPA is the successful integration of CARIFORUM states into the global supply chain. So the intent is to help us to build out our productive sectors, and through our integration, through our collaboration with the European Union and the UK, get us more and more immersed into global supply chains, ourselves being a part and being able to get inputs from other areas within the confines of the agreement. Now, on the import side, and I must mention it, that there is gradual liberalization for EU and UK imports, EU and UK exports to Jamaica of sensitive products. So for your information, we have what we call baskets. Coming into Jamaica, we have our zero basket, where goods would have been immediately liberalized, and we have our phase baskets. Now, in that phase basket, we have what we call sensitive goods, goods that we are liberalizing over a period of 25 years to achieve zero, but it gives us some policy space because we are a developing country. And then we have our ultimate basket of sensitive goods, which are excluded, totally excluded from liberalization. Predominantly, these are primary goods: poultry, pork, I think pimento. Yes, but we do have a lot of it. We are oils and fats, some cheeses, but we are giving a level of protection to our industries so that they can grow and abound. So we have not opened the gate totally to the big EU or UK. All right? So we have our exclusions list. Now, how do we access these benefits under the EPA? We need to satisfy the market access requirements. Now, the Trade Board and Jamaica Customs were on the same page because we use the same example: pepper sauce. We use the same example. So just to take you back to this slide, now we have to satisfy the rule of origin. Rules of origin is key for us to access these markets. As I said to my colleague earlier, it's a treaty. The treaty has rules. We must abide by these rules, and we must meet these rules to gain access. And so we have general rules of origin, and we have product-specific rules of origin. And we must meet both, whatever they may be, as it pertains to our good, to get market access. So when we look at the pepper sauce, so our first step is to ensure that our products meet the product-specific rule of origin as per the EPA. Every agreement, the agreements may have different product-specific rules for the products, yes, based on what is desired by that trade agreement. So similarly, pepper sauce, 2103. Now, under the EPA, the rule is that it should be manufacturing which all the materials used are classified within a heading other than that of the product. So it is a change of tariff heading rule. And Kanika would have examined that totally. So what it means is that the inputs, the extra-regional inputs should be classified in a heading other than that of the final product, which the Trade Board would have gone through thoroughly with you. So just that was previously raised, pepper is under Chapter 9. And so if we, for instance, we have a pepper epidemic, God forbid, I don't know what we would do without Scotch bonnet, but say we have a pepper epidemic and we have to import pepper, it would still qualify, although it's extra-regional, it's under Chapter 9 and not under Chapter 21. So we would have to ensure that your pepper sauce meets the rule of origin. I'm going to go into the steps later that we undertake to ensure that this is the case. Okay, right. And then it would also have to satisfy the general rules of origin. And the general rules of origin, and I'm going to go into that into more details, would also look at things that are critical, such as direct transportation, but I will talk to you about that a little later. Then it would have to satisfy other entry requirements. Every country outside of the terms of the trade agreement will have standards and regulations, yes? And many of our manufacturers here are aware of some of these standards and regulations that are required to meet, to ensure market access. So it is important whether they are SPS standards, sanitary and phytosanitary standards, applying to our meats, our plant life, and so forth. We must ensure that we would have met these requirements, and where health certificates are necessary for entry, we would have obtained same. Yes? And then we get to proof of origin. We must ensure that the appropriate and valid proof of origin is completed, verified and certified by the certifying body. For the EPAs, the certifying body is customs. And so we must ensure. And then there's always the shipping and logistics questions. Having met the rules of origin, customs signed our certificate of origin, how do we now get the goods to the destination? And Ms. Johnson will go into details on some of these shipping and logistics requirements that you may face. But for us, just a little guidance, ensure that the goods are appropriately packaged. Don't let anybody make you put frozen goods in a box, you hear? That type of thing. Ensure that you use the correct mode of transport. You may have to ship your product by air to ensure if it's perishable or based on the demand of the market. So you must bear these considerations in mind. Not everything can go in a box, not everything can go in a barrel. You see? So we must ensure and be aware of what that market accepts. When we carry fruits and vegetables, be aware of what you'll face on the other side. Now, we're not talking about the Sibera, the U.S. Agreement, but I know that U.S. Customs does charge you a lot of money to process your packages once they arrive, and we're not talking about customs duties. So be aware of these border fees not associated with that which is waived under the agreement. Ensure that it's directly transported and are presented to the Customs Administration of the importing country with the proof of origin and other pertinent documentation. Trade Board would have said the same to you. Don't leave it, don't forget to send the proof of origin, or you'll be confronted with delays. And not every agreement permits the retrospective issue of certificates of origin or for it to come after the product and not being presented with the product. So it's important that it is there at the time of arrival, that you can benefit, your goods are not delayed unduly, attracting storage and all of these additional costs. So in brief, that's how we satisfy the requirements. What I'm going to do is break down all the steps now for you. So we're going to talk about rules of origin. Now, and we are going to talk about it within the scope of Protocol 1 to the Economic Partnership Agreement. Protocol 1 addresses all matters pertaining to rules of origin and how you can satisfy those rules. So just generally, what are rules of origin? Rules of origin are a set of criteria that determine where a good was made, and that is its economic identity. All right, they outline the conditions under which a good may be considered as having originated in a country. As I said earlier, they may be general or specific and differ according to individual trade agreements. So one size doesn't fit all. And so I encourage you not to have this shared expectation that having entered CARIFORUM under the revised treaty, that the same criteria is required for the same product under the EPA. Don't hold that expectation, all right? Rules of origin ensure that the benefits of an agreement are only given to those products that are eligible and originate in one of the parties to the agreement. So we have had cases, and I'll give you an example, where we had a case that was brought to us by the European Union, because we also do post-verification for all agreements. And so if there's a concern, it comes to us. And in it, they doubted that the product itself had originated in Jamaica. All our files show that it originated. However, they were able, and that's why it's important for you to be very open and honest with us. You hear? We are your voice. You don't meet with that entity, we do. And if we can't defend you and we don't have the information, then your goods are going to lose the preferential market access. So tell us everything. We are confidential by law. All right? Yes, we do not disclose importer or exporter information. We don't. So the reality is, well, if the court orders us, it's a different matter. But the reality is that it's important for you to disclose. Now, this manufacturer had imported an input from a CARIFORUM member. The product is going, a CARIFORUM member, the product is going into the EU. And we had it on file that they got it from this person who we know manufactures this product. The EU was able to say to us, but in this year, that company in the CARIFORUM member that Jamaica bought from ran out of supplies and bought X number of tons out of the United States. And based on what you have presented, we believe that the goods of US origin are the ones that were used by the Jamaican manufacturer, although they bought it from the CARIFORUM member state. Now, trade agreements, we're talking about money and revenue foregone. No country gives up their revenue like that. So although it sounds nice, although my colleague said the steps are too many, but the reality is that while you can get this, you are under great scrutiny, and so is your product. Just like in the Jamaica Customs Agency, where we have a unit to scrutinize it, they have a unit to scrutinize it because they are losing money as a result. One moment. When we investigated the matter, it got to a point that the CEO had to meet with us. They had no idea that the CARIFORUM member had bought out of the US. They did not do sufficient due diligence. When we looked and did all the tracing on the documents, we had to know, we found out that that input was not used in the product exported, but it was used otherwise. But we had to convince the EU with documentation, and the manufacturer had to open their processes because it's not a penny worth of goods. And they have a continuous market access. People want their goods. And this manufacturer exports in by the container load. So it's not a little bit of goods, it's not a little bit of money. You see? So we have to be very careful. So we have to ensure, and that's the role we play, because it affects the product and it affects Jamaica in that market if it is found, especially on more than one occasion, that the goods that we claim are eligible are not. All right? So the current exporters and those who are going to be exporting, we encourage you to be as open with the Trade Board and with the Jamaica Customs Agency as possible. Just tell me everything. We will tell you what to keep back. All right? Okay. So, and in our discussion, okay, I didn't do that. Okay. Right. So why rules of origin? And we would have discussed it to a large extent here. It is used to determine the application of import duties, quotas and other quantitative restrictions, sanitary and phytosanitary restrictions. They're used to inform trade statistics, standards requirements, anti-dumping and countervailing duties, which is a different information session altogether. And so they are applicable to both preferential and non-preferential trade agreements. But today we're talking about preferential trade agreements. So now the Protocol 1 that I mentioned earlier. Protocol 1 to the CARIFORUM EU and UK-EPA was developed with the aim of ensuring that, with respect to trading goods, the objectives of the agreement are met. And we spoke about those objectives earlier under the benefits. So it seeks to define the general and specific terms and conditions under which trade should be conducted between the parties. And Protocol 1 covers, and I have my beaten up copy here, general rules of origin, product-specific rules of origin, and the terms outlined under the annexes to the agreement. As you can imagine, the EPAs can be very complicated. It's a very complicated trade arrangement. And the EPA with CARIFORUM, it's the first EPA that the EU ever signed. So after that, after this EPA, it had every complexity in the book. If you look at the other EPAs with the African continent, the Pacific states, they are far more flexible and light, but this one is overly technical. So we won't burden you with it. We will just ask you to call the Jamaica Customs Agency. So general rules of origin, these address some of the basic elements of preferential trade agreements. So you would have seen that the Trade Board Limited outlined the origin criteria, wholly obtained and substantially transformed, which they broke out in the change in tariff heading as well as the percentage value added. But there's also a component that's called the de minimis, and what that means is that where, with respect to change in tariff heading, if that rule, if it is that you have an extra-regional input that is in the same tariff heading, but it is within the de minimis rate, the product would still qualify, right? And so, for instance, under the EPA, it's 15%. So, for instance, say you had bought some garlic or something in your pepper sauce that's minuscule, and a percentage of that garlic wasn't Jamaican grown. So it would have, no, not garlic, no, it's under the same tariff heading, sorry. No, wrong example, back, delete that one. Wrong example, it wouldn't have worked. But what it means is that if one of the inputs fall under, say some of the seasoning fall under 21. A particular seasoning mix, which is classified under Chapter 21, specifically 2103. And it was used in the product, but it came outside of the region or outside of the parties of the agreement. What will happen if it constitutes less or up to 15% of the input, the value of inputs, then it would still be eligible. All right? Did I confuse you? Very good, clear as water. And then we have the direct consignment rule or the direct transport rule. Under this agreement, well, all agreements have a direct transport rule, but it plays a major role under the EPA. Very active because, and you can understand, because of the distances, yes? Now, the direct transport rule says that the commodity must be directly transported, I'm going to say Jamaica, from Jamaica to, say, France, yeah? And so it must be directly shipped from Jamaica to France. Now, by reason of transport issue, it may transit a third country, and the activities that can be carried out on it should be offloading, reloading, or anything for the preservation. And it must be under customs surveillance. Now, if your commodity transited and you cannot prove to the customs administration in France that it didn't go into the commerce of the third country, they have the right to deny you preferential market access. So after going through all of meeting the product-specific rule, and that's why it's very important, if it is that the product came off, and that's why you must make sure that when you're making your logistics arrangements, find out the routing, what action will be taken on the product, especially if you're shipping less than container load. If you have a container, the likelihood of your container being opened is less. But if you have less than container load and it's a consolidated shipment and it's going to, and some of it going on to somewhere else, there's a possibility, the risk is higher. And so what is necessary is for you to do your due diligence and ensure, check your routing, check your consolidator, check what is going to happen. Is it going to have to be moved across country to another port to meet another vessel? Will this be done under customs control? And it's good to note whether or not the customs of that country will issue what we call a certificate of non-manipulation. Provide evidence to say it did not go into the commerce of that country. There was no commingling going on. And so the nature of the good would not have been tampered with. Yeah? All of that has to take place. So you need to practice that due diligence, and we're talking about the direct transport rule. Proof of origin, documentary evidence. Now, this trade agreement outlines the proof of origin that is required, the EUR1, and I'm going to share that with you shortly. It prescribes how it should be completed and the conditions for its submission and its validity. When the question was asked earlier, I was able to see that while that provision that would have assisted Grace is not in the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, it's provided for in the EPA. So under the conditions for submission, they do provide for goods entering a customs office and outline those conditions to be able to be, for the customs administration of that country to issue a replacement for onward movement of the good to another party. So that would have been one of the conditions for submission, yes? So there are a number of conditions that are covered here that will assist you. There is retrospective issue of the certificate of origin, which means that after the product has left, there may be specific or unique circumstances that would have affected the exporter's ability to transmit or to have obtained a certificate of origin prior to its export and arrival in that country. The rule provides that you can come back to the Jamaica Customs Agency to say, this is the situation, this is what is going on. We will investigate, because we have to be assured, and so that the Customs Administration in France will be willing to accept it. But at least there is a provision for that. And of course, there's a verification of origin process, and that is post-clearance verification. So every member party to this agreement has the right to initiate a verification of origin investigation into your product. So if you sent your product to the UK, you sent it to France, you sent it to Spain, their customs administration can, whether randomly or based on intelligence, decide to initiate an investigation on your commodity, to question or to verify what we, the Jamaica Customs Agency, would have attested to, and that is that your good meets the origin criteria. You must be prepared for this. This is the case under all the other agreements as well, but just under different terms. For the EPAs, this process takes up to 10 months. Yes, treaty obligations. And not only does it take up to 10 months, but you see your importer in France or the UK? No, he has to deposit on the possible duties payable for the life of the investigation so that he can move off with his goods, or the goods go and sit down there if he doesn't pay until it is finalized. And it's the same when it comes to us here in Jamaica. Those are the terms of the treaty, because you must protect the revenue as well. So if at the end of the 10 months, it turned out that John Tom product did not originate because they didn't give customs all the information. And so we made a decision based on what we saw and was presented with, and it turned out at the end of the day it don't qualify. They can recover, they have their monies to just pull down on, and they don't have to run after or find the importer. They would have had it already. Yes? Now, what I have found is that we, as exporters, we need to pay attention to the fine print of trade agreements. You need to, and all of these trade agreements are available on the internet. The Trade Board, you can access it on the Trade Board website. You can access the EPAs and all of them on our website as well. So you, and on the Jamaica Trade Information Portal. So they are there for you to read and look at the fine print. Please read the fine print. So we must bear this in mind. And that's why I said to you, please ensure that we have fulsome information. So we are going to go to the product-specific rules. Thank you. So product-specific rules of origin. We would have outlined already that they define the working or processing required to be carried out on non-originating materials in order for that product manufactured, for that product to obtain originating status. So it's going to dictate the level of working or processing that needs to be undertaken. All right? And these rules often reflect trade sensitivities. So for instance, in our review of rules of origin of the RTC, when we are looking back at those product-specific rules, we're looking at our industry, how to protect our regional industries, how to access key productive inputs. So we want it flexible enough that you can produce the product without harming local industry and so forth. Similarly, with the EPA, those issues are borne in mind. Just to say that we are we are looking at reviewing Protocol 1 with respect to the rules of origin. We are renegotiating those at this juncture. We're in a little pause period to include the product-specific rules, yes? To see if we can increase the flexibility of these rules. So this example is jam, where we're jams and jellies, which falls under HS Code 2007. Now, if you look at it closely, within the HS, there's no breakout here, you know. You see the breakout saying containing 20% or less, and then a separate rule for containing 20% or more. That is not in the harmonized system, which is our classification Bible. However, for the context of the agreement and the interest of the EU, they would have, sugar is an interest before the EU. They monitor sugar and goods that utilize sugar heavily. So you may find that you'll have less flexible rules for these goods, like Grace and their juices, right? I'll allow Grace to talk about their own business. But just to say, based on the percentage of sugar utilized, some goods will not qualify, while some will. And so those of you who are juice makers, and we have one syrup exporter that doesn't qualify under the agreement any at all, as you can imagine, because it's just sugar. But he has a market. So those of you who are exporting and you may not meet the rule of origin, point to note, there is a global tariff for the UK. Seek to access it to see if what is the I'm going to say MFN, most favored nation rate of duty, the general rate of duty outside of a trade agreement that is applied to the product. Yes? Because guess what? Under the trade agreement, you're good. If you qualify, you may get access at zero duties. But then your checks may reveal that that item generally attracts zero duties anyway. Or 2%, or 3%. And that informs your decision on pricing, how you will proceed. So because it doesn't qualify, don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. do further investigations, because for the European Union and the UK, quite a large percentage of their products are imported at 0 or 0 to 5%. So do that investigation. I know I should be talking only about the trade agreement, but if we look, but it's how to benefit. If we look at the rule here, it is a change in classification, the same rule with the pepper sauce. But just to show you, and I was looking at it the other day and to say to myself, now, how it works for the EU, we have a process of what we call co-equal rules. So if you notice there are, you have the first column with the HS code, second column with the description, and then you have 2 other columns labeled, you're not seeing the top, C and D. Now, you can use one or the other. So if you can't satisfy the rule in column C, and you can satisfy the rule in column D, you can utilize column D. No, but if you notice in column D, there are 2 rules. Are you noticing the first one? The fourth column has 2 rules, the dashes. You must meet both rules if you're going to use column D. Wherever there is a double rule, you have to meet both rules. No, but if you look at the rule in column D, you can see how complicated it is. And I'm wondering if this was an error in judgment, because it calls for the change in classification heading, but it also incorporates the sugar rule. Yeah? So your sugar, the value of any material of chapter 17, and sugar is under heading 1701, must not exceed 30% of the ex-works price of the product. So including the fact, in addition to the fact that you must have a change of tariff heading, you must also meet the sugar rule. So your product-specific rules are in Annex 2 to Protocol 1. And that's just a hint of what is needed, or what your product may encounter. But call us at customs. We do want you to export as well, and we will seek to guide you in as much as possible. And to the extent that we have on occasion, if you invite us into your entity, we will train your staff. We have done trainings for the private sector, and we have gone into entities. When we do trainings on the EPA, we're looking at a minimum of 3 days, though, because we try to equip you in as much as possible. And when we look at your products to assess their eligibility, we walk through your system and try to guide you in as much as possible. So the proof of origin for us here in Jamaica as exporters is the EUR1, which would be our certificate of origin. So what do you require? A valid original certificate of origin must be supported with an export declaration, and should be accompanied by the exported goods. The movement certificate, EUR1, is a certificate of origin prescribed under the EPAs, and the EUR1 is certified by the Customs Authority, so it is certified by us. However, the Trade Board Limited sells the document for us. As a tax body, we can't be selling any documents. So our colleagues at the Trade Board Limited sells the EUR1 for us at a cost of $300 for the single form. But if you know that you have great market access and you're going to be exporting frequently, they have a deal. You can get, let me see, it's not really a deal. You can get a pack of 50 for $15,000 and a pack of 100 for $30,000. It's no deal. Well, we have to talk to them, to see if you buy more, wholesale price, right? So, and they are valid for 10 months. It must bear the authorized stamp notified by the customs party. And just to say, because we are delaying, I'm wrapping up, yes. Just to say that each member state must notify their stamp, and they do check for the legitimacy of the stamp or your goods are delayed. Quickly taking you through the application process. So you apply in writing to the International Industrial Liaison branch. Did I switch over? And the application is referred to our incentive branch for verification checks. Our incentive branch will contact you, and we will provide you with the manufacturer's material data sheet, which we'll ask you to complete and submit. We will guide you in its completion, and we need you to submit all the supporting documents. We will verify your documents, and we will visit your manufacturing site. We come into your business, we observe the process to ensure that this is not simple processing, and which would exclude your product altogether. And on the basis of that site visit and documentary check, then origin is determined. The International Industrial Liaison branch will complete the verification and notify you as to whether or not your product is eligible. If it's eligible, we will also notify you of that, as well as all the exporting points in customs across the island, to say that Tom Stroke, this list of products, they are eligible and they can be exported, so you can certify. Because we do not have a centralized operation. You can take your export, your EUR1 to any exporting agency. With the supporting documents, they will verify the online, the notification and approval of those products, and they will sign and stamp the documentation, and then you can proceed to export. If you are not eligible, we advise you as same, and I've been told that I'm totally out of time, so I'm going to stop. No, can I get 1 second? Thank you. I'm sorry, Delaney. I take it out of my question and answer time. Responsibilities of the exporter. I can't reiterate it again. Conduct due diligence in respect of your goods and the origin of your goods and your supply chains, please. So verify supplier and supply chain integrity. And one point to note, a lot of you may export goods that you do not manufacture. If you're doing that, you need to present to us a supplier's declaration. When you call customs, we will give you more information on that. Keep complete records for goods traded under the EPAs for at least 3 years. Comply with all lawful requirements of customs. Accurately prepare and submit your export declaration to the JCA along with the original certificate of origin and other supporting documents. Remember, we are going to stamp. We're not yet electronic. In that area, we have to come to some agreement with the EU and the UK on that. Give feedback. Please contact us. If you're having any difficulties trading under the agreements, please contact us, all right? And participate in stakeholder consultations like these and technical working groups where invited. Please do so. We need your input. And lastly, our role, as I intimated earlier, customs is the designated competent authority for the administration of rules of origin within the scope of the agreement. The Jamaica Customs Agency has direct responsibility for the implementation, enforcement, and administration of the provisions detailed in Protocol 1 while ensuring facilitation of legitimate trade and protecting Jamaica's borders. And thank you.